Okay, please be seated. Members of the jury, I know you don't have any windows in the courtroom that you're waiting in, so I wanted to let you know that it hasn't started snowing, okay? All right. Okay, does the defense have any cross?
Good morning, Major Johnson.
Morning, sir.
Your present employment is where?
Goodhue County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, and you're a major there?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury what that means as far as, in Goodhue County, that's in Red Wing?
Yes.
Red Wing. Could you tell the jury what that means, being a major on the Sheriff's Department?
Yes. Basically, I oversee the patrol division of that agency.
Okay, so you're the boss?
One of them.
All right. How many oversee the patrol division?
Just me,
So you're the boss of the patrol division?
of the patrol division.
Okay. You don't like to brag about it?
No.
Okay. You've known Kim Potter for many years, is that right?
Yes.
When you came on the police force of Brooklyn Center in 2005 was when you first met her?
Yes.
And although you didn't work the same shifts, you would run into her at various times?
Yes.
Would you consider yourself a friend of hers?
As of recently, or I should say, over the past few years, we've become more of friends.
Okay. And in 2019, you were a sergeant at that time, but you were assigned to the patrol of her unit, right?
Yes.
Correct? Okay, I mixed those words up, but I think you understood it. So you oversaw her from 2019 until this year, correct?
Yes.
And was she, in the review of her, was she determined to exceed expectations? Do you know what that means?
The objection is overruled.
Did she get that, tell me if you know this or not, did she get in her review the top review of exceeded expectations?
Yes.
And is that meaningful? What does that mean to a patrol officer?
That means that they go above and beyond the normal activity of a patrol officer.
And you were aware that she also worked with domestic victims, is that right?
Yes.
And she also was a casket carrier for officers killed in the line of duty, correct?
Yes.
Now, to your knowledge, and since you worked with her since 2019, worked over her, have she ever received a complaint of excessive force?
No.
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled. And the answer will stand. Major, will you just remember, if an objection is made, stop talking right away, okay?
Yep.
And don't answer unless I tell you to.
Yes.
But the answer will stand.
Okay. So, let's just go to the incident. On April 11th, you heard Officer Lucky over the phone, go ahead.
Radio.
Radio, thank you. You heard Officer Lucky over the radio say he's making a traffic stop.
Yes.
And you knew at that time that Officer Lucky was a trainee, and Officer Potter at that time was their FTO, correct?
Yes.
Field Training Officer.
Yes.
And so you decided to go there as being the officer to watch over it, correct?
To be his assisting officer, a backup officer.
Okay, a backup officer. Your Honor, excuse me a minute. And we already went over the video and of your testimony as to when you arrived and you learned about that the fellow that had been stopped Daunte Wright, had a warrant for a weapons violation.
Yes.
What does that tell you as an experienced police officer and now a major at Goodhue County Sheriff's Office when somebody has a weapons violation?
It means if they had a weapon before, it's possible they have a weapon again.
All right. It also means that they had the weapon illegally because they did not have a permit for it.
Correct.
And in order to have a weapon, you have to go through classes and get a permit, correct?
To carry it, yes.
So he had a weapons violation warrant by a judge, correct?
Yes.
And he also had a restraining order, correct? Order for protection, OFP.
Yes.
And at the time you were talking to Lucky and Kimberly Potter, Officer Potter, you learned that, correct?
Yes.
And they decided to execute the warrant and find out who the lady was in the car, correct?
Yes.
And was that proper procedure based on your experience and you overseeing them?
Yes.
You agreed with that, correct?
Yes.
You also knew that there was marijuana, you were told there was marijuana seedlings or something else in the car, correct?
Yes.
So your goal was, when you went up there to the Wright car, was to arrest him for the warrant and also to find out who the lady was next to him to make sure that was not the lady that had the FTO on it, or not the FTO, the order for protection on him. Is that right? And when you went up to the vehicle, you went on the passenger side, correct?
Yes.
And that was to what?
As a cover officer.
And what does cover officer mean?
Somebody who gets a different view of what's going on inside the car.
Okay, and if there is some kind of attempt to escape, you could assist in stopping the escape, correct?
Yes.
And that's what cover would be, covering your arresting officer, correct?
Yeah, part of it.
So, in this case, we've watched many, many videos and time sequences. And when you went up to the car, Officer Lucky, based on the videos, told Mr. Wright to step out of the car. Do you remember him telling him that? You don't remember exact time, but do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And did Daunte Wright step out of the car right away, or don't you remember?
As far as I remember, he did.
Okay. And when he stepped out of the car, Officer Lucky was going to handcuff him, correct?
Yes.
But you were the first one that yelled over to the other side of the car and told Daunte Wright that he was under arrest, correct?
Yes.
And then the other two officers, Officer Potter and Officer Lucky, also told him he was under arrest, correct?
I didn't hear that.
You didn't hear that?
No.
All right. So between the time that you told him he was under arrest until the time that he resisted arrest was approximately, according to the tapes, approximately 13 seconds. Is that about right? From when you told him he was under arrest to when he tried to get away from Lucky and get in the car?
Without seeing a timestamp, it sounds about right.
Sounds about right. And then when he pulled away to get back in the car, 6 seconds later, when he was struggling with Officer Lucky, and 6 seconds later, Kim Potter, according to the video, went around Lucky to assist Officer Lucky in trying to restrain Daunte Wright from not getting in the car. That's what's in the video, Judge. I'm cross-examining him.
This witness is sequestered. He's talking about some other piece of evidence.
All right, no speaking objections. If you want to make an objection, one-word objections, and we can sidebar if you want. Is the state requesting a sidebar?
Yes.
The objection is overruled, and you may proceed, Mr. Gray.
Thank you. According to the other video shown to the jury, after you said he was under arrest, approximately 13 seconds later was when Daunte Wright started pulling away and trying to get back in his car. Do you agree that that's what you saw?
Yes.
About 13 seconds? And then approximately 6 seconds later, although you didn't hear it, on the videos from the other officers, from Officer Lucky, Officer Potter said, "I'm going to tase you." And did you hear that?
Yes.
Well, you heard the second one, I think. There was "I'm going to tase you" first. There's two "I'm going to tase yous." One you didn't hear. It was on the other side of the car.
I heard one.
Yes. We'll get there. And then after, oh, by the way, when Officer Lucky was attempting to keep him outside the car, was Daunte Wright resisting, or was he not? He was resisting and trying to get back in the car, wasn't he?
That's what it appeared.
Yes. And he didn't stop at any time when Lucky was wrestling with him to say, "Okay, I give up," and put his hands behind him, did he? Okay. And although he didn't hear it, seconds later, there was a statement by Officer Potter, "I'm going to tase you." He didn't stop then either, did he?
No.
He kept resisting, right?
Yes.
And what's an officer supposed to do when you're executing an arrest warrant for a weapons violation and trying to find out who the lady is when somebody does that? Are you supposed to let him go?
No.
What are you supposed to do?
Put them under arrest.
And if they try to get away, use force, correct?
Yes.
So, 3 seconds after she said, "I'm going to tase you" the first time, she said again, "I'm going to tase you." And at that time, according to the videos, she was pointing what she thought was a taser, but it was a gun, at Daunte. Right.
Is there a question, Mr. Gray?
Yes, I am. I wasn't done with my question. At any time between the time that you saw him, by Wright, Mr. Wright, go into the car, into the white car, until you heard the second, "I'm going to tase you," did he stop resisting at all?
No.
Did he enhance his resistance by still fighting with people to get in the car?
Yes.
And what's your size? What are you, 6'2" or something?
Yes.
6'2"? Good shape?
Would like to think so.
All right. And we've seen Officer Lucky. He's a good-sized man, correct?
Yes.
Did it appear unreasonable to you as an officer that this driver of this car, Daunte Wright, with this warrant, would do what he did? Did it seem unreasonable to you?
Yes.
So after the second, "I'm going to tase you," and that's the one you heard, after you heard that one, did the Daunte Wright stop at any time and say, "Okay, I'm done, give up"?
No.
And at that point in time, was that when you went into the vehicle to grab that shifter?
It was probably a little bit before that.
Okay. And you're in there and you were struggling with him with your strength, right?
Yes.
To you it was an exigent circumstance, an emergency, correct?
Yes.
And you were trying to get a hold of the shifter to stop him from grabbing that, correct?
Yes.
And you also tried to get a hold of the key with the other hand, correct?
Yes.
And you were in that vehicle and your body was lying over the young lady in there, correct?
Yes.
And one reason your body was lying over her was to keep her from sitting there, right? So she wouldn't get involved. Fair
Yes.
statement?
Yes.
And then you weren't having any success in calming him down either, were you? He was still fighting and struggling, correct?
Yes.
And then you heard taser, 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 and that would be approximately 3 seconds after you heard Officer Potter say, "I'm going to tase you." There was a time period between when she said that and when she said taser, 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 correct?
Yes.
During that time period, did Daunte Wright at any time show any sign of stopping, giving up, saying, "Okay, I'm done"?
No.
And then after, when the taser, taser, taser was said, approximately a second later, you heard the shot, and you thought it might be a taser, might be, you didn't know. It was a loud noise, correct?
Yes.
And the reason that an officer with a taser says taser, taser, taser is to warn other officers that were in the vicinity of this fellow, Daunte Wright, to back off, correct?
Yes.
And by the way, in using a firearm, you're taught in training that if you use your firearm, you're expected to shoot your firearm twice, correct?
Not every time.
Okay, but are you trained on that?
It is one of the things, yes.
Yes. And that's called using deadly force, correct?
Yes.
In this case, you heard one pop and that was it, correct?
Yes.
In between the time of taser, taser, taser and a second later, did you release from the body of
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And then you went outside the car, correct?
Yes.
And you're disoriented, correct?
Yes.
And that's because of your struggle with him and the loud noise. Fair statement?
Yeah, the loud noise.
And you, as soon as you got out of the car, according to the videos, that car took off like a jet. Fair statement? Did you see it in the video?
Yes.
Did it go quite fast?
Yes, took off quick.
And within seconds after it took off, there was a loud crash. Actually, 2 crashes, correct?
Yes.
And that was the accident down the block, correct?
Yes.
Approximately a block away, half block, you remember?
Just a little more than a block.
More than a block. And then Officer Potter realized that she had shot him. Fair statement?
Yes.
And you didn't know that at first, correct?
No.
And then after she said she shot him, she was really having a difficult time saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," correct?
Yes.
And you were concerned about her, correct?
Yes.
And then she said, oh my God, I'm going to go to prison." Do you remember her saying that?
Yes.
And Lucky said, according to the video, "No, you're not. No, you're not." Kimberly says again, "Oh my God." Lucky says again, "No, you're not." You remember that?
I don't.
All right. Then you said, "Kim, the guy that was trying to take off with me in the car." You agree you said that, right?
Yes.
And if he had taken off with you in that car halfway, what would have happened to you? What would you think would be the worst that would happen?
Probably dragged.
Dragged and what?
Injured.
Seriously injured, maybe even dead, right?
Yes.
And if that were the case, would an officer in your position, with Officer Potter trying to stop him from resisting with you and resisting Lucky, would it be fair for that officer to use a firearm to stop him?
By state statute, yes.
By state statute.
Yes.
There's a statute that says to avoid death or grave bodily harm, you have a right to use deadly force, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware of that statute.
Yes.
So basically, based on these videos and the conduct of Daunte Wright, as far as you're concerned, and you were there, Kimberly Potter would have had a right to use a firearm, right?
Yes.
May I confer with co-counsel for a minute? Thank you, sir. I'm done. Thanks, Judge.
Redirect?
Thank you, Your Honor. Major, you were asked about her right to use a firearm,
Yes.
and you've had extensive firearm training, correct?
Yes.
And when you use a firearm to shoot somebody, that is deadly force.
Yes.
And so what Ms. Potter used here was deadly force.
Yes.
And when you use deadly force, you have to consider surroundings.
Yes.
And when you...
This is his witness.
The objection is sustained.
Okay.
No leading
I'm
questions, please.
I will rephrase. When you use deadly force, do you need to consider surroundings?
Yes.
And do you need to know whether you could shoot another police officer or another person?
Yes.
And on April 11th of 2021, the Brooklyn Center Police Department had standard issued ammunition.
Yes.
And that was, what kind of ammunition did you use?
I don't know specifically which one.
Was it hollow point?
Yes.
And when you, could Officer Potter, in using a firearm, have shot you?
Possible.
Could,
Improper again, he's leading.
And the objection is sustained.
how is that? May I?
Okay. Counsel, I'm going to let you rephrase that question.
When you heard this loud pop, which side of the car were you standing on?
Passenger.
And which side of the car was Officer Potter on?
Driver.
And where in relation to the two of you was Mr. Wright?
In between.
And when you heard the loud pop, where were you in relation to Mr. Wright? How far from him?
6 inches to a foot.
And where was the female passenger at the time of the pop?
Right to my left.
And where was Officer Lucky?
I don't know.
And at the time of the loud pop, you could not see Officer Potter, correct?
No.
And in part because you were looking, well, why is that?
I was kind of looking down towards the center console, and Mr. Wright was in between us.
And you don't know, well, let me ask you this. You did not take out your, well, did you take out your gun and shoot Mr. Wright?
No.
Did you take out your taser and taser Mr. Wright?
No.
You indicated that you could have been dragged. Were you dragged by the car?
No.
And in fact, did you just stand up as the car pulled away?
Yes.
The entire time of the interaction with Mr. Wright, where were your feet?
Either against the curb or against the street.
You were asked if, based on your position in the car, you indicated you could have been dragged, correct?
Yes.
And you indicated that you wanted to keep him from fleeing.
Yes.
And is that, why did you then grab the shift knob of the car when you first reached into the car?
To keep it in park.
And to prevent it from moving?
Yes.
And when you had your hand on the shift knob, did the car move?
No.
When you had your hand on Mr. Wright, when you had both your left and your right hands on Mr. Wright's right arm, did the car move?
No.
After Officer Potter used her taser, did the car move?
After the taser?
Correct. I'm sorry. After she said taser and used her gun, did the car move?
Yes.
Just want to clarify a couple of things. You were asked if you were disoriented from the struggle and the loud noise. You said loud noise. Why were you feeling disoriented at that time?
Inside the vehicle with such a loud noise kind of throws your balance off and confuses you a little bit.
Did it affect your ability to sort of do your job right at that moment?
I was leading and moved the question straight.
Well, I'll let you finish the question first. What is your question?
Did that affect your ability to do your job at that moment in time?
The objection is overruled. I'll let you answer.
Not specifically to do my job.
Were you disoriented at all from the struggle, as counsel asked you?
No.
You were asked, you thought the car took off like a jet. Was jet your word?
No.
Would you ever describe it as taking off like a jet?
No.
Did Mr. Wright ever strike you?
No.
Did the passenger ever strike you?
No.
Did Mr. Wright ever grab a hold of you?
No.
Did Mr. Wright try to grab a hold of the shift knob?
Yes.
Were you able to prevent that?
Yes.
Mr. Earl Gray, Mr. Gray, a name like,
Right, Mr. Rose.
with a name like Matt Frank, I should not make that mistake.
No.
Mr. Gray asked you if you were lying over the female. At any time, was it necessary to hold yourself up by leaning on her?
To hold myself up?
Right.
I was just kind of balancing against her.
Were you standing on the ground at that point?
Yes.
What was the point of leaning against her.
So that she wouldn't be involved in what was going on.
Based on your training and experience all these years as a police officer, are you trained about entering cars of people who might flee?
No.
You don't receive training on that?
No.
Is it a good idea to enter a car that's fleeing?
Not if it's driving away.
So in entering the car, are you taking some risks?
Yes.
And by grabbing the shift knob, did you alleviate that risk?
Yes.
You indicated earlier about a weapons warrant. Is it always good to be concerned about the potential of a weapon when you make a traffic stop?
Yes.
And so that makes you, I guess, extra aware to the presence of a weapon. Would that be fair?
Yes.
At any time during your interaction with Mr. Wright, did you see a weapon?
No.
Did you see him reach for a weapon?
No.
In the years that you've been working as a police officer, have you had to draw your taser?
Yes.
Have you ever drawn your handgun instead of...
The objection is sustained beyond the scope.
Does it exceed expectations to draw a gun and shoot somebody to death instead of their taser?
Same objection, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained.
Your Honor, may I have a sidebar with the court?
Yes. Okay, the objection is sustained. It's beyond the scope.
So when Miss Potter on this day, April 11th, told you that she had pulled the wrong gun and used her Glock instead of her taser, is that inconsistent with what you thought of her when you said she exceeded expectations before?
I don't know what she was thinking at that time.
And that's partly because you didn't see the incident from her perspective.
Correct.
So your opinion about, well, all right. In the years that you have worked with Miss Potter, in particular over the last few years, have you come to like her?
Yes.
And you mentioned doing the carrying caskets. I think there's a better description for that. What is that?
I believe she was a lieutenant with the Law Enforcement Memorial Association.
And so what does she do for that?
They provide support for law enforcement funerals.
And you appreciate that she does that?
Yes.
And you like that she does that?
Yes.
Do you admire her?
Yes.
Did you consider her a good coworker?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything further?
With respect to hollow point bullets, are they used by law enforcement because a hollow point bullet will stay inside of the person shot rather than go through the person and hit somebody else?
That is a ballistic characteristic, yes.
Yes, and that's why they're used.
Yes.
And a car can be considered a weapon, correct?
Yes.
If it takes off fast, fleeing somebody, and it hits somebody, that's a weapon, that car, correct?
Could be, yes.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Anything further from the state?
Yes, Your Honor, I'll be brief. One thing that can hollow point bullets also affect the damage done to the person shot?
Yes.
And in training as a police officer, have you been trained about the dangers of shooting occupants of vehicles?
Good. Object outside the scope of my cross-examination.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
I don't think we've ever had a specific training on that.
On shooting occupants of motor vehicles?
On shooting into a vehicle, yes.
And in fact, there's a policy about it. Is there a policy in Brooklyn Center about that?
Yes.
And is there also a policy about using a taser on people who are operating motor vehicles?
Judge, same objection. I didn't mention it at all.
All right. I'm going to let you answer.
Somebody that's operating a vehicle, yes.
And so the reason for that is what?
If they're driving a vehicle and you incapacitate them, it could cause an accident.
That's just what Mr. Gray was getting at, correct?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Gray.
At the time that Daunte Wright was shot, was that vehicle moving?
No.
That's all I have.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. All right, members of the jury, we're going to break for lunch, and I'll check the weather in the meantime, okay? Okay, please be seated, counsel. I take it the state has seen the defense's objections to the exhibits?
Your Honor, you're referring to the autopsy photo?
Yes.
We did receive the email, yes.
Okay. I haven't had a chance to look at these photographs, but if they have already been shown in the past,
Your Honor, they have not, and I do have plans to get a flash drive for the court and counsel during our break.
okay, good. Thank you. We'll deal with that. I don't know if we're going to get to the medical examiner today or not, but we might as well try to take care of this as soon as we can. Right.
Are we leaving early today, Judge?
I'm checking the weather, okay, because I want everybody to be safe. But and we're breaking for an hour. We'll start up again at 12:30. I may call you in earlier to talk about exhibits, okay?
1:30, Your Honor?
12:30?
1:30.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me. It'd be 1:30.